So, I am known locally as the children's librarian here in town, but I am also known by the nickname the Town Smiler, which is in itself kind of funny, but it refers to this old freestanding chalkboard in the center of Woodstock, Vermont. Think tweed, not tie-dye. And for decades, it had been where you would go to see upcoming events, news. It was all handwritten, and by a man named Frank Teagle. Now, I'll get back to how that influenced my being called the Woodstock Town Smiler, as well as why my talk is called The Art of Living with Impermanence, and how the creation and appreciation of impermanent art can help improve our appreciation of living, and maybe even death as well. But first, I'd like to speak about one of my favorite topics, which is the early 1990s television program, Northern Exposure. Anyone who knows me well knows that I have an uncommon fondness for this program. Every Wednesday, I would have my friends over for our weekly Northern Exposure watch party. And this Wednesday in question, the episode entitled Burning Down the House aired. This episode was important for me because it changed the way I understood what art can be and what forms it can take. So, Northern Exposure is an ensemble program that takes place in the unfortunately fictional town of Sicily, Alaska. One of these ensemble characters is named Chris in the Morning. Now, admittedly and somewhat embarrassingly, he had a big influence on me. Now, Chris was an ex-con, a philosopher, the town's radio DJ, thus the name, but he was also an artist. Now, from time to time, Chris would get a crazy idea in his head for an art piece, and everybody in town would get excited because they knew that it was going to be something probably pretty interesting. His idea this time was to fling a cow from a giant catapult to create what he called a pure moment. Seems simple enough, right? But when he discovers that Monty Python flung a cow from a giant catapult in the Holy Grail, he's devastated. And he says, it's been done. That's it. But when he finds his way through his artistic crisis, when he discovers an upright piano that remarkably survived the flames of a house fire, to Chris, this is a sign of rebirth. It's like a phoenix, literally from the ashes. By the end, Chris's giant catapult is built. It's technically a trebuchet, and it is ready to fling that piano. The people in town are all gathered. Chris makes a great speech, sword held high for dramatic effect, and gives the signal to launch. Now, everyone in that field, everyone in the room with me, and I myself especially, were transfixed when this piano soars through the sky in this high arc above the field to come down to a cacophonous crash in the grass. Whew, it was well done. Now, I understand that this was written as part of a script, but somebody had to come up with this idea. And it was a good idea. TV show or no TV show, it was beautiful. It was a pure moment. And in that pure moment, I realized that art didn't have to be something that hung on a wall or sat on a pedestal. That sometimes it's just a moment of awe. Now, my first opportunity to explore making impermanent art was in the late 90s when I was asked to make a snow sculpture, or help make a snow sculpture, on the shore of Lake Champlain for the Vermont State Snow Sculpting Competition. Yes, that is a thing. It's sort of an art sport or spart. Competitions all over the world, the cold bits. So this being Burlington in the late 90s, we of course made a goddess riding a giant tortoise heading out toward the lake. To help you imagine and appreciate the art of snow sculpture, I think it might be helpful to understand a few points. First, it's not ice. People do carve ice, but it's just a completely different thing. Second point, it's huge. The last snow sculpture that I made with my team in Colorado, we began with a block that was 24,000 pounds and was 10 feet wide, 12 feet tall. Maybe thinking, well, I don't understand why you do this. And that is the next point. It is pretty miserable. Which doesn't really explain my next point, which is that making one of these carvings is so much fun. It really is an act of joy. And I think that it's because of this final point. It is going to melt. Or be bulldozed for insurance purposes. But either way, I think that the fact that it is not going to remain, that every act that goes into the process is both an act toward the completion of the sculpture, but also an act of futility. And I think that it's this background sense of futility that forces one to appreciate the moments that go into the process, the small victories, such as when your calculations actually work out, or how much better the food tastes after you've been hacking away in the cold for hours. From that goddess riding on a tortoise, fast forward a little bit through a series of unlikely events that finds me in my early 20s, helping out my aunt with her house and taking little adventures into Boston. And on one of these adventures, found myself in the late afternoon in Harvard Square. And I was stepping onto a sidewalk when I had the thought, I'm going to meet the woman I'm going to marry. And this was not something that I had ever considered before. This had not been on my mind prior to this moment. But sure enough, farther on down that block, on that same sidewalk, I passed by a beautiful woman, and our eyes met, and we looked back again, and then we just turned around and walked up to each other. Hi, my name's Lina, she said. Our attention was soon drawn to the rising of the orange harvest moon over the treetops of Harvard Square, and it felt like a sign. Later that evening, I told her that I had the thought that I was going to meet the woman I was going to marry, which she thought was a little bold. But it turned out to be accurate, because 2 years later, under that same harvest moon, this time up in the hills of Vermont, surrounded by our friends and family, we were married. When I met Lina, she had a 7-year-old child, and we went on to have 2 more kids during our time in Cambridge. 2008, we decide, I think it's time we move out of the city. Go find a place where the kids can have the opportunity to be kids, like we had. And that's exactly what we did. We moved to Woodstock. And we found a community here. We were excited. We were excited about our art. We were excited to continue the creative relationship that we had grown back in the city, here in this small town. We even opened up a gallery downtown. So we moved here in August. Come mid-December, we were glad that we had moved to a small community that we felt comfortable being taken in and wrapped up and cared for, because it was about that time that our new family physician was concerned with some lingering health concerns, with some lingering health issues that she had been struggling with for a long time at that point, and sent her to get some tests. And when we left the hospital that day, our world had changed, and we were in tears. She had a stage 4 cancer diagnosis, and that ride home, we thought about the long road ahead with all the uncertainties. And by the time we reached our new little home, we were laughing. And that stuck with me to this day. I think it's an example, well, it's a testament to her sense of humor, her indomitable sense of humor. It just couldn't be kept down. And that was an example of how she lived the next 9 years, and how I aspired to live with her, and with her as an example. We lost Lina in August 2017, and what followed was a really difficult time personally. I felt the support of my community, my family, and my friends, but as time went on, I felt as though I wasn't available to receive that support. It was difficult making the transition to being a single parent and balancing work life. My artwork had understandably faded into the background during her illness with the responsibilities of giving care. Back in the Cambridge years, it had grown, and it grew to include more permanent art, such as oil paintings for gallery showings and illustrating children's books for publication. And all of that, at this point, felt non-existent. And I was having a hard time finding the inspiration to start back up. And then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, something switched inside me. And I felt this need to contribute something. I saw the essential workers and even the people at the supermarket who were selling us the last roll of toilet paper on the planet. And I thought, I want to contribute something as well. But all I had to offer was the ability to make a drawing, which, unless you're using it as a substitute for toilet paper, is not going to help very much. I had an aha moment, kind of like Chris had when he discovered that piano in the wreckage of that burned home. And I thought about the chalkboard in town, the Woodstock town crier. And I thought, I wonder if I could use that. I wonder if I could use that to display messages from people in the community that they wanted to be delivered to other people in the community or the community at large, and delivered in this fashion, hand-drawn, big, so you could be seen by passing cars, by people on their solitary COVID walks. During that first year, I let the idea evolve. I listened to what people had, how they responded, and what they needed. And the physical messages, or the written messages, began to fade into the background, as what I realized what people really wanted was just something different, something unique. And I settled on making detailed, fairly elaborate drawings that were of the moment, of the season, of this place. And as COVID began to relax and people began to come out more and started stopping, talking with me, I realized that there was just so much energy, so much enthusiasm for, like I said, something different. And that inspired me. And I realized that I missed the point when I thought I wanted to contribute something. What I really wanted was to feel like I could offer something to the community and have it be received. And that feeling was therapeutic for me. Time goes forward. I'm making drawings, changing it up maybe once a month. And one of my favorite things is witnessing someone who hasn't experienced or encountered the Smiler before. So I usually see a few things happen. One, just surprise, the novelty of this art project, and kind of, I guess, a delight. This just isn't that nice. Then something that I almost always witness, and this is the most interesting part to me, is there's a certain amount of alarm, which I find fascinating. I think people come across this and they see something that is so effort-filled. It takes clearly so much time. Whether they like the drawing or not, it's clear that somebody put a lot of time into this. So I usually do put about between 12 and 24 hours into one of these drawings spread over a couple of days. And I think that there's something inside of them that recognizes that, in a way, they are the drawing. Deep down, we all have a realization that we are also the accumulation of all the efforts that we and our family and our community have put towards us, and we can be gone in a moment, like the dust on a chalkboard. The practice of making impermanent art, and I do mean practice, feels like something that can help support me as I go through life, and inevitably things have to come to their natural end. things that we love, sometimes people that we love, and eventually facing our own end. So I find it encouraging to feel like we can do something to get comfortable with that, just that fact. And maybe we'll find a sense of appreciation and wonder when we get there. Impermanent art can show us the awe of fleeting beauty as maybe it comes crashing down on us while we witness a piano in flight, or the physical example of making a snow sculpture and just bearing through it so that the joy of the simple, small successes are highlighted. But sometimes it's the necessity of finding the art of living when you know that our moments here are precious and finite, especially when a loved one shares them with you, knowing that theirs are limited. So while I was trying to figure out what I wanted to say here about impermanent art and how it's about the process, and it takes the focus off of the result and the end, when I started to consider, well, what do I do when I get to the end? It made me think I should probably go back and watch that episode of Northern Exposure. I'm glad I did, because I think Chris in the Morning said it best when he said, the thing that I learned, and this is key, is that it's not the thing you fling, it's the fling itself.